Patty from the studio. Hope everyone's doing well. Just wanted to show you a quick video on this technique I've been doing, transferring photos onto canvas. I love old photos, whether I find them in the thrift store or my family, and I don't like to use original photos. So, how do you do it? Got this great picture at the thrift store, and it's, on modern photo paper, but I'm pretty sure that's somebody's great-grandparents. So I hated to see it go into a landfill, but I didn't want to cut it up. But I wanted to incorporate it into a collage or another project. So let's see how, with very limited supplies, takes a little bit of time, but not too much, but let's see how we can transfer photos so they're embedded into the canvas and you keep your original photo. Here we go. So these are the basic materials that you'll need for this project. One is an old black and white photo, and again, I picked this up at the thrift store, and it was in, like a cheap plastic frame. It's a modern print, from Shutterfly or a drugstore, and I just couldn't bear to see it go into the landfill. So I bought that at the thrift shop for, I think, $1. Then you will need to copy it and print it. Now, I have a LaserJet and an inkjet printer, and I have found for this project the LaserJet works much better. I think the inkjet, because of the ink, causes it to bleed sometimes in this process. So if you have a LaserJet printer, I recommend trying it with that first. Black and white LaserJet printer. Then a canvas. This one is a little bigger than my photo because I'm hoping to collage and add some other elements to it when it's completed. Then you will need some Mod Podge and the matte finish I prefer. They have different types. The matte works the best, and you can get this anywhere, Amazon, craft stores, etc. Then you'll need a sponge and a container for some water and a brush. I like actual paint brushes. The foam brushes for me don't work as well, but that's a personal preference. You can use any kind of brush. And the disposable ones are good if you're playing and practicing. This obviously is a couple of bucks. And that's it in terms of supplies needed. So I'm going to be doing voiceovers because I'm working in the basement and it's a little loud. So let's get started. Next steps to come. So the first step is you're going to take your brush and your Mod Podge and your canvas, and you're going to coat the canvas with the Mod Podge in an even, not super thick layer, and make sure all the little bits and pieces are covered. And that's pretty self-explanatory. So once you have finished kind of pushing the image into the glue, again, avoid getting the Mod Podge on the paper. Work out any air bubbles that you might see, any wrinkling, and just be gentle because you don't want your paper to rip because it's kind of wet now. And then you're going to leave this for 24 hours and maybe a little bit more if you live in a humid environment. So for me, it's usually a good 24 hours just to make sure it's all fully absorbed into the canvas. So I'll be back in 24 hours, or through the magic of cameras, right now. So we've let this sit. We've let this sit for 24 hours. So now we're going to take our sponge, and you're just going to saturate the paper that's left on the canvas. And you'll start to see the image coming through a little bit. So you want to get the whole paper wet. Just keep going around. And it doesn't matter if you get, you know, outside of the paper on the canvas wet. Just keep going around. And you're going to try and fill in these white spots as much as possible. That is still paper that's left. And they may not come out. It might mean a spot you missed with the glue. But for the most part, you just try to get every little bit wet. And you don't want to rub, you want to blot. Okay. Okay, so that looks pretty much like we got all the spots as much as possible. So you can see the image, the paper is releasing from the ink. And that's kind of the fun part of this. So finish getting it all saturated as much as you possibly can, but no rubbing yet. You just want to kind of blot. Make sure you get the edges and the kind of the white of the photo. I'm not that worried about, but just to make sure. Now it's really saturated. So let this sit for like watching an episode of something on Netflix amount of time, or a nice cup of tea. Okay, so it's all wet. Let it sit for a little while, and we'll get back to it shortly. Okay, so we let this sit, and now what we're going to do is we're going to start to rub in a circular motion, and you'll see what's going to happen. The paper starts to come away, and you want to do this kind of gently. It's still a little delicate underneath. Sometimes I'll wet my hand. And you kind of just keep doing this process until all the paper is peeled away. And you start to see your image underneath. And it gets pretty messy. And what I use, I like parchment paper as opposed to wax paper. I feel it's a little heavier. It seems to be a little bit more secure, doesn't roll up, and it keeps your surface clean and neat. And if you feel like your piece is drying out and you're having trouble peeling anything away, you can just wet it again with the sponge. It doesn't have to be quite as wet as original. And again, just kind of blot it. And just keep plugging away. And again, be gentle because you don't want to rip the paper underneath. And that's pretty much it. So I don't think you need to watch me do the whole thing. But you can see it gets a little darker when you've gotten all the paper off. And when it's not as thick, that's when you have the possibility to rip. So just be mindful of that. Take your time. The only thing that'll happen is it'll get dried out, so you just wet it again. So you're going to keep getting rid of this paper. Making it wet again if it's too dry. And, you know, you'll get a feel for when it's getting very thin. And it's messy because you have all this, like, peeled off paper. But I'm going to keep working on this, and I'll get back to you when I'm done. And I'm just going to be doing this around the whole piece and trying to get off as much of the paper as possible. Also, just another hint, when I made my copy and I printed it out on the inkjet, use just regular copy paper. Do not use photo paper or any fancy paper, just the regular white copy paper. You can see how it starts to peel away. So let me keep working on this and I'll get back to you. So here we are. All the paper has been rubbed off and away, and as you can see, your photo now is part of the canvas. It's not copied onto it, it's actually embedded. So a couple of things. Here you can see where I didn't have the right amount of Mod Podge, or I was rubbing a little too aggressively and the paper below starts to rip. So be careful of that. Use a gentle hand. It's crooked because I'm planning on embellishing this canvas with some other pieces to create some sort of collage. And so if you're doing it on your own, make sure it's centered onto your canvas. I think this is a great way to preserve memories, great for anniversary gifts or birthdays, and that's it. And it's fun and it's easy and it doesn't take a lot of supplies. So let me know how you like it.